negotiations to bring this message to the UN. And in 2014, and this was discussed at last year's meeting in Istanbul of the Dynamic Coalition, we launched something called the Lyon Declaration on Access to Information and Development. You can see that at lyondeclaration.org. So we very quickly were able to get a coalition of around about 600 organizations, and around about 70% from the library, but we were extremely pleased because we had groups like Mozilla, Alliance for Affordable Internet, tech sector organizations and development organizations working alongside us. It was clear that this idea of increased access to information supporting development resonates outside of the library community. So with that declaration in our hands, we did our advocacy, we did our lobbying, and we reached the point in September where we attended the big summit to see the final framework released. I would make an observation here which I think is relevant to the group here at the IGF. Throughout this process, it was very clear to IFLA that the people negotiating the development framework in New York were pretty ignorant of what WSIS and even the IGF is. And that goes not just for member state delegates, but it went very much for the civil society groups working on development in New York. When I asked them about their relationship with WSIS, there was like tumbleweed, it passed, they had no idea what I was talking about. And IFLA found itself in the very strange position of being one of the only organizations to work in the internet governance field and in the development field. And I've made this clear to a number of submissions we've put in on WSIS, that in some respects it was incredible that a major UN process could ignore another major UN process. It was a real eye-opener to us that this sort of thing could happen. And I think it's important to remember this going forward, because I'll talk a little bit about what happens next, and that will have implications for this community, I think. I don't know how many of you have seen the final framework, but there are 17 goals and 169 targets. So to be honest with you, there's something in there for everybody. If you think back to the Millennium Development Goals, there were 8 goals. So we've doubled that, and we've added probably around about 10 targets per goal. This is the framework that governments are going to be using for the next 15 years to guide their development at national levels. And this is the framework that they're going to be rated and ranked against in terms of the progress that they're making. We feel that actually the agenda itself is a good one. It's never going to please everybody. There's been a lot of voices saying that 17 goals, 169 targets, it's too much, it's not focused enough. But to be honest with you, there is a lot that those of us with an interest in development can do with this framework. So I'll pull out a couple of things that we found particularly interesting for those of us working in libraries. We've said all along that all of the goals need an access to information component to work, whether you're looking at getting increased agricultural yields, whether you're looking at improving maternal health, whether you're looking at improving education, access to ICTs. These are all things that can be improved by having good access to information and the skills to use it. Information's a starting point for the progress you're going to make in relation to those goals. So we've taken a look very closely at the framework. We know that Goal 2, which is about agriculture, Target 2.3 talks about doubling agricultural productivity. Well, libraries in many countries, and Ramuna's already going to talk about some of this, I think, are already working with local farmers to get them the right information they need to increase crop yields. Goal 3 talks about reducing maternal mortality. Again, we know that libraries in Ghana offer programs on this. There's other libraries around the world that are very closely connected to their health services and are able to really link new and expectant mothers and mothers who've just had children with the information they need to bring those children up in a safe environment. It's clear to us that a target like number 4.6, which talks about ensuring universal literacy and numeracy, it's a little bit of a no-brainer that libraries can help there. But I would point out that until IFLA intervened in the last week of the negotiations, there was no mention of universal literacy in the vision part of this agenda. So it just goes to show that we can have an impact in the advocacy that we do. And then the one that I think which is most important in some ways to the discussions we're having here is Target 9C, which talks about significantly increasing access to ICTs and striving to provide universal and affordable access to the internet in least developed countries by 2020. Um, we would have liked to have seen that extended beyond least developed countries, but working with what we have, the World Bank estimates there's nearly 1 billion people living in LDCs. They estimate an internet penetration rate of about 8.6%, and by some very rough math, I think that leaves us with over 800,000 people to get online in LDCs by 2030. No matter how many mobile phones we put out there, no matter how many home fixed broadband connections, there's going to be a significant proportion of that 800,000 that are going to need public access to get online, which is where we come in with this dynamic coalition. Where we are right now with this agenda, it has been agreed at the international level, so we can already start working on it, but the indicators which are going to be used to measure success will not be finalised until March. The most interesting target that IFLA fought for is target 16.10, which talks about increasing public access to information, something which libraries are very committed to. And right now we are looking and working very hard within the UN still to make sure that the indicator that's used to measure that is actually helpful to us. At the moment they're talking about an indicator to measure that would be the number of journalists killed in a year. We find that a bit of a strange approach to measure increased public access to information, and we are trying to change that situation. Also of interest to this group, I think, is the proposed creation of something called the Technology Facilitation Mechanism, which is part of the agenda that will look at how we achieve these goals. The UN is going to set up a knowledge platform that will help exchange information on technology between the UN's member states, using the sort of north-south, south-south and triangular cooperation model. But very interestingly, in New York when that was launched, there are conversations about whether that model will go on to encompass all of the UN's activities around technology, which should be quite interesting for the group that look at the IGF and for WSIS, because it seems that there is a very, very grey area about the role of those two activities and processes within this new technology facilitation mechanism process. IFLA has applied to be on the multi-stakeholder group for the TFM, and we're waiting to see, with bated breath I should say, whether we get a spot on there. I will also be very interested to see whether the people representing civil society on that group come from this community, or whether we will discover that there were some civil society groups that we've never even heard of suddenly find themselves on that platform. It's fair to say that there are some back-channel conversations going on about who gets to be on that. So to conclude, just to say that the big next step, and the thing where I think our coalition can help, is that this new agenda will be implemented at national levels through national development plans. So that means that your country is going to be drawing up a means of implementing this agenda over the next 15 years, deciding which goals and targets it wants to prioritise, and then putting into place processes and activities to reach those goals and targets. So it's our ambition that libraries should be included in as many national development plans as possible, because we can provide access to information, we can provide access to ICTs, and we can be really strong partners in development at national levels. So right now, IFLA is working with national library associations to get them in with their policymakers, get them talking about what libraries can do. So on your desks, you have this handout, which is a pretty swift overview of why we think we can contribute to this framework. I'd like to point out that we are ambitious. This conference is talking about the next 1 billion to be connected. We've already gone straight to 4 billion, so nothing if not ambitious. So I'll stop there because that provides, I hope, a bit of a context for the work that we're doing with public access, and the public access principles which we're going to discuss, I hope will lead us towards some concrete activities to help get the next billion online. So thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. We can take a few minutes for questions now, if anyone has any, and you're welcome to speak from your seat or to come up to the mic here. Are there any questions? Okay, so we'll go ahead to Manu from the U.S. State Department, who is going to talk about the Global Connect initiative. Manu.
Thank you. It's really great to be here with you all this afternoon, and I'm just really excited to be joining this very important discussion and pleased to see the terrific work that's being done here on public access, very important initiative. I have been in the Obama administration since 2009. I I've been in the State Department for the last 4.5 years. And when I first came to the State Department, my role was essentially representing the U.S. government in multilateral forum, the UNGA, the ITU, other kind of UN bodies. And I think that's very important work. But I came at a point in my own career, in my own reflections, that we should be doing more vis-a-vis Internet for development outside the UN system, and also thinking about how we can give effect to goals that have been adopted in the UN, whether it's the framework that was just really laid out really well, or whether it's WSIS, or whether other targets that are out there that really, once these targets are agreed upon, once the international community has bought in, the best thing that we can do at the IGF and as stakeholders, whether we're NGOs or industry or government policymakers, is mobilize resources to show how we are actually achieving them. What are the solutions for actually delivering upon some of the promises that are agreed upon in the UN system? And partly because of that, that view, we are pushing really hard at the State Department through Global Connect. We launched the initiative just 3-4 weeks ago in New York along the lines of the high-level meeting that was just discussed. And we were joined by Jim Kim of the World Bank, the President of Estonia, the President of Tanzania, a broad coalition of industry, NGOs. And we're just trying to rally attention and around the need for greater connectivity, public access. And the reason that we chose that number, again, was because it was like an internationally agreed upon number at the ITU plenipotentiary. But the point of Global Connect is to showcase how there are so many stakeholder-driven solutions that are currently existing, how important government policies are to really unlock digital growth, what kind of role NGOs can play in terms of freedom of expression, how we can really and try and bring us all together, whether it's through satellite technology, mobile technology, fiber technology, and really providing both infrastructure access and also trying to provide higher level political attention at the head of state level, at the foreign minister level, for things like digital literacy, for things that are being kind of suggested here today in the statement. Because I felt like that was one thing that was missing, even though the political conversations about the internet are now at levels of head of state or foreign minister, and you kind of see that on the news. We're not really there on development yet, or on the issues that we're kind of discussing today. And so part of our effort here is to try to raise the profile and visibility and and prioritize these issues for all countries, senior level executives, NGO leaders, so we can really come together and accelerate progress towards connectivity and extending its benefits to the rest of the world. And I've been really thrilled with the support so far. It seems like there are a lot of initiatives out there, whether it's WEF, whether it's the Alliance for Affordable Internet, where it's this initiative. And I think the IGF is so uniquely situated to have these types of conversations with all stakeholders on an equal footing, to think about how can we actually work together as a community to think about what are the policy options for connecting the next billions, as you would say, right? And how can we really think it through together. And so it was great to have the main session. It was great to have this panel. And you can kind of see that there's a lot of high-level interest and attention here. For us, we're also making the case that the internet has become a key driver of sustainable economic development. We're very excited that the World Bank will be helping all of us make this case very soon, because they're coming out with their annual World Development Report. In January, it will be released. And this year, it focuses on digital dividends for all. And this is a very seminal report. It hasn't really been done on the internet for about 10 years. But this will also kind of justify a policy shift, which we're suggesting through Global Connect, which is we want to mainstream the view that the internet is as fundamental to every country's economy as energy, electricity, roads, highways, and should be prioritized on every country's national development strategy and on the international development agenda. That actually is kind of a new idea for some development agencies. And so when I talk to folks at AID or Millennium Challenge Corporation or the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which are U.S. development agencies, they haven't been thinking about the internet along these lines. They think about electricity, or they're thinking about energy or traditional infrastructure. But we're trying to make the case, and reports like the World Bank's Development Report will greatly assist us as well, that we need to now think about the internet, both in terms of how we can incorporate internet projects in traditional infrastructure that might be done, because you can do that at a cost savings when you're laying out fiber optic cable, when you're trying to do trenching, but also kind of thinking strategically about how to encourage developing countries to adopt positive ICT environments that really are supportive of freedom of expression, that are supportive of digital literacy policies that are supportive of a lot of the principles that you have here vis-a-vis public libraries. One of the best statements that we received for our launch was from, when we launched this 3 weeks ago, was from 22 global NGOs, including your organization, Stuart. And I just want you to know that it was very meaningful to see that level of support and know that there was interest in trying to help the State Department, help like-minded partners, help industry folks really build momentum towards connectivity. And we're really looking forward to supporting the effort here that you're driving and that you're trying to lead, and also with respect to kind of any follow-up discussions that we can have at the State Department, working with our embassies to really kind of socialize the principles and the desires of the public libraries around public access. So it's my honor to be here, and I look forward to our Q&A and talking to folks maybe even afterwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Manu. Does anyone have any questions at the moment for Manu on what he's been talking about? Yes, Makane.
Thank you, Manu. My name is Makan Fai from the African Regional IGF. It's good to hear about this initiative. However, when it comes to funding, this initiative, when they go to the country level, usually the libraries will not be seen as priority. So what can be done at the level of the US government and at the World Bank to make sure that libraries, documentation centers, archives are part of this funding? I suggest that really, since the inception stage, we try to put percentages, shares on institutions which will be benefiting on it. Otherwise, I'm afraid the libraries will be left out.
I think it's a very, very good and very smart point, and I feel that what we have to do is we have to make the case that libraries, like all community centers, are basically open spaces for everyone to kind of see the benefits of connectivity. And we did this domestically in the US through a American Recovery Act program called Broadband Technology Opportunity Program. And we basically conditioned some of the, or we prioritized some of the grants based on whether or not it was a community center that was actually involved. Libraries. And I was at the Commerce Department at the time when we did that, but I think it has to kind of be at a design stage, and we have to encourage people to do that, whether it's a multilateral development bank or whether it's a development agency, or even talking to international and U.S. industry about how important it is to try to support connectivity for public libraries through satellite technologies, fiber, other ways. And I do think that we need to be very granular with them, like you were just with me, in terms of how exactly they're going to be prioritizing this, but also as a community suggesting that they should, and that there are really good reasons for them to do this. But so I fully concur with your sentiment. I'm hoping that in all of our outreach to the development banks, the development organizations, other countries, that we encourage them to kind of think about projects at the design phase that reflect the importance of community centers so that we can really extend community connectivity.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions from the floor? Okay, Stuart, go ahead.
I hope it's okay to ask a question from the panel, but so what exactly sort of happens next? What's the immediate next steps? How do we get involved? What can I tell my people?
So we had our initiative is 3 weeks old. It enjoys tremendous political support, which is really great. So we're going to build a global coalition, so it won't be a U.S. only effort. And it'll be many of the folks that we support 3 weeks ago, including your organization, hopefully, and other industry folks and other countries. But next, we'll have our next event. We'll be showcasing our commitment through Global Connect at the WSIS high-level meeting in mid-December. And WSIS, again, is one of those international agreements that we have both talked about, where everyone came together 10 years ago and thought about action lines to help developing countries in certain ways, whether it was cybersecurity or even development or freedom of expression. And at kind of the high-level meeting, we're going to be showcasing not only this global coalition, but also that we are trying to enlist the multilateral development banks, major development organizations around the idea of internet infrastructure being as important as traditional infrastructure, and also some of the other things I talked about. And also showcasing that for us to achieve the goals in documents like WSIS, these are the ways that we do it. Through some of maybe these innovative industry solutions, through government policies that are prioritizing public access, and other ways. But we will be back in New York mid-December, and we'll have, again, the international community there, and we're looking forward to finding ways to partner with your organization and other organizations that are here in thinking about how to really build momentum, even more momentum, for our Global Connect effort.
Great, thank you, Manu. So we'll move on now to Rumune, who is going to tell us about some initiatives in Africa.
Please really have a possibility to input into dialogue how libraries can be part of a solution to connect next billion in least developed countries and low resource environment. My organization, IFO, which stands for Electronic Information for Libraries. We partner with libraries in developing and transition countries to enable access to education, research, information, also knowledge and skills that allows people to improve their livelihood and develop communities. Today I will share one initiative, the latest initiative that we had in that we had in 2014-2015 in 3 African countries, Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. And it was meant to help public librarians to become agents or intermediaries to help people use technologies that are already available in public libraries. So I will use, as this is a case, so I will use some slides because they are nice pictures and you will see people who are working on the ground to support their communities. So our initiative, Capacity Building for Public Librarians in Africa, has reached now 80, we trained 84 librarians from 80 public libraries in Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. Libraries that already have computers in their organizations, and at the same time has no knowledge and skills to use those technologies to support their communities, besides opening the doors. And at IFO, at Public Library Innovation Program that I represent, we believe that public libraries are really powerful vehicles to support communities when access and connectivity is available, because this brings most up-to-date resources that communities need to develop their farming practices, to improve health, to understand how to deal with diseases or resources that support kids to improve their marks at schools, which means putting fundament for their future careers and better life in communities. Here on the slide I want to show you a result of one of our workshops on new library services in Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda. And keyword cloud is actually about challenges and issues that librarians saw in their communities, when they thought about how they can help using technologies. And some of those words you can recognize. It's access, is of course reading, it's about poverty, it's about support to women and girls, farmers, and so on. And we believe that this is the key thing for consider libraries as a place for public access, because librarians are there in communities. They know what challenges and issues communities face. At the same time, librarians are quite knowledgeable also and think about development of the libraries to support those communities. And on the left side, probably for you, there is another picture from Ghana. Regional librarians were thinking about roles that their libraries can play if they would have access to different resources and tools and could provide to their communities. So, and it was, I mean, we were having this exercise in with the perspective of 10, 15 years. And they were saying that libraries could become creators of local content, economic incubators, learning space, connecting communities, and so on and so on. There was 2 groups that were discussing this, and some roles, as you see, are the same. So, and this is also an example that libraries actually looking at the communities, and they are not, let's say, imposing some standard solution. They look what community needs are, and they can use internet and connectivity to really answer those issues that matters in the community. And we started to work with Ghana, Kenya, Uganda because we saw governments and also other stakeholders providing equipment to public libraries. At the same time, we saw that there was an issue, a big issue with librarians' knowledge and skills to use these tools, as I already mentioned. And therefore, we thought, okay, we probably having experience working in, let's say, with pilot projects, how to use technology in developing countries and different, we can help to develop capacity building program for librarians and show how they can open this resource to their community. And we built curriculum, which is very, very practical and down to earth, that leads to actions in the libraries or leads to new services in the libraries using resources that are there. This curriculum consists of 4 modules, which is ICT, advanced ICT skills. That includes also how to teach others to basic skills. It includes also the part on online resources and internet searching, a big gap actually in public libraries that we see in developing countries. And it's a part of, information literacy, complex probably. And then we had a module on new library services, or how to plan new library services when you have technologies, or how to fundraise for improving technology infrastructure when you see the development. And definitely advocacy and communication, because public librarians also should be able to explain to other stakeholders why their mission in the community matters, and it also includes, advocating to governments, to local authorities, but also to communities to understand the importance of new services. So I'm really happy to say that our program was very, very successful, and it could be considered as one of good practices how to connect people locally. And I think there were a few key things that helped this program to work, because we as an international non-for-profit organization, we worked with local partners to develop this program and adapt it to needs in each country, and the curriculum, although it's similar, but actually the training was a little bit different depending on the skills level and also needs in each country. We also involved local and international trainers, so it was a team working. We also did require our participants to do some practical work after they come to libraries, like to use knowledge they get, train their peer librarians or communities in ICT after the first module, and so on and so on. And here are results that I want to share. It's 80% of our participants in 4 to 6 weeks when we did our post-training assessment together with local partners. They started new services. They started training for people, and they also were addressing different target groups' needs, women and girls, school children, farmers, and so on. They also started to provide guidance to people on searching internet and online resources. And also good news for us was seeing 2/3 of our participants taking a lead in reaching to their community groups, also media and authorities, explaining why ICT-based services and digital literacy is important. And they also started to fundraise for improvement of their infrastructure, and at the same time scaling ICT training program in their communities. So it's really a let's say, evidence that those services will most probably survive and continue and develop. And in conclusion, I would like to say that we believe that such trainings, like for public librarians and librarians, should be a part of any public access initiatives on national level. And it is not enough to put infrastructure, but also there is a need to have very skilled intermediaries so that investments would pay off and take off, let's say. And also I can say IFL is really open for dialogue and discussion on working on such initiatives, and especially in Africa, but also in other regions where we work. And then finally, its capacity building is just one of our works. We also did, as I said, some pilot projects, how ICTs in libraries can help communities development, and also we encourage public librarians to share their knowledge, how they use technologies, and this usually works very well to promote good practices. And that's probably it. Sorry.
Thank you, Renee. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, go ahead. So I'll go to first for the person standing, and then sounds like it.
Could you introduce yourself? Yeah, sure.
There is a mic up here on the right-hand side, and it's needed for the remote participants. So yes, please do come up to the mic.
My name is Azizi, and I come as the chairman of the Regulatory Authority of Afghanistan. It's very interesting to see the way, in particular, you have been working in Ghana, Kenya, and other African countries. In Afghanistan, as part of the Universal Access Fund that is at the disposal of my institution, we have been able to connect more than 90% of the universities, public universities in Afghanistan, out of 43 plus universities and institutes of higher education. 36 of them have been connected either through fiber or through the satellite. High-speed internet is available. Now, we have also established the computer labs across these universities. Of course, not enough for everybody, but at least in each university we have got from one computer lab up to 5, depending on the number of students. Important thing for me is that we have not yet reached to have the local platforms for the digital libraries. One of the things is that we are also connected as part of the TIN program of the Pan-Asia. We are connected to European countries through a dedicated fiber line. But at the same time, it's important that what resources are available at your disposal, that we avoid reinventing the wheel and just get a well-prepared or well-established platform, and we could just use it for having the local contents onto it available. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone want to make any comments? Sure.
Yeah, I think the don't reinvent the wheel thing is very interesting for me, who's someone who's worked in this space for sort of 10 years or so. I think back at the beginning of WSIS, we saw a lot of emphasis on the telecentre movement, which has had varying degrees of success. In some countries, it has indeed been successful in providing public access, but in other countries, there's a sustainability issue around telecentres. So what libraries offer, of course, is public libraries are embedded in the budget. And very often it's easier to increase funding for an institution that's already in a budget line rather than start from scratch. Now, I can't speak for that in sort of Afghanistan, but that phrase rings true with me because it's taken us a long time within the context of WSIS to really raise the profile of libraries, even though we've been there a long time. A lot of that's to do with us not raising our own voices. So, you know, there's a real onus on us. But I'm interested, one of the things I want to explore when we get down to some work is the Universal Service Funds question as well, and what can be done there to increase public access. So, you know, we would be more than happy to pick up further conversations so that we can help you not reinvent the wheel and share some of the things that Ramuna's organisation and our members are doing.
Thank you, Stuart. Sorry, Ramona, you had a question, comment?
I forgot to say that in Ghana and Kenya, actually, public libraries that we worked with got the equipment through Universal Access Fund as well. And in Uganda, Uganda Communication Commission, which is managing these funds, also discussing pilots in public libraries. And I think this might be a way for libraries to be connected and to be a part of offer public access in remote areas in any country, and without need to really reinventing something. Of course, there are places where libraries does not exist, so, you know, there should be some policies in the government to make people to connect. But where libraries exist, there's, I think, there are no better places to put access to knowledge equipment, because it's natural for libraries. And also, you don't need to transfer people who will serve those points, which the librarians are there. And I know that those initiatives that failed in some countries of public access points actually failed because people were transferred from bigger cities to remote areas, and they did not want actually to stay there, even if they were provided some salaries. And at the end, when the government funding stopped, those points were not able to generate incomes because they were dealing with least affluent communities that cannot pay.
And I think we have another comment here. And then Seyi, if you want to come to the mic.
Thank you very much. My name is Deirdre Williams. I come from St. Lucia in the Caribbean. I have a rather specific question. I wondered in your training, what was your strategy for teaching your students to evaluate the value, the reliability of the information that they were finding? Because much of it is not coming from where they are. It's a difficult question where I come from too. Thank you.
Now we're going to need to keep our answers pretty short so that we can get into the concrete work as well. Thanks. And we have another question here.
So quality of information was part of our module that was online resources and internet searching. Though we realized it's too short for after piloting this in 3 countries, and now we've just started this program in Ethiopia, and we are expanding this module and also putting more stress on how to evaluate information.
Thank you. And the mic over here if you're wanting to ask a question or make a comment.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Seyi Ferreira. I am a librarian in Brazil, and also I am a member of the FEBAB, that it's the National Library Association. And in behalf of the FEBAB, I would like first to say thank you to IFLA for all services you are doing for public library, especially for developed country. In Brazil, we do have, like they say, we do have the whole academic use libraries connected because you have a research national network, and all libraries, academic libraries are connected. We also have a lot of telecenter, but this doesn't mean that you do have a powerful public library. This is the very difficult problem for us. I think in Brazil, the telecenter doesn't work information literacy, and this is something that the public libraries must do. And then I would like to ask for both, of course, especially for Stuart, if you are looking for some special contribution or some special work in the Latin American and the National Library Association, perhaps if another person here from Brazil can join us at FEBAB, because you will want to work very strong in this. Thank you.
And one last person, and then we'll go to the talking about concrete actions. If yours is short, you can also come to the mic.
I'm not sure it's a question, maybe a comment. I'm Judy Ward, and I'm a member of the European Parliament. I'm on the Culture and Education Committee, but I'm a development student as well. So this is really interesting for me. I just want to say how fantastic the work is that you've presented, and it's great to see developing countries value libraries in a way that they are not being valued back in the so-called developed world. We are now cutting our library services. We don't seem to value them anymore. So coming to sessions where the importance of this kind of informal education is really, really valued is fantastic. And I think we need to be importing some models back into the so-called developed countries, because, you know, you get it, and we're somehow saying that it doesn't matter anymore. So it's just a comment. Okay, and I'd be really pleased to work with you in the future. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm on African, Caribbean, and Pacific delegation. So.
Thank you. And we had one more person.
Hi, my name is Seyi, and I'm from Afghanistan, representing the civil society. I'm very glad to see that you're focusing more on the least developing countries, because that's where the problem of access, the problem of price, and the problem of reliability and the quality of, in particular, the internet, and access to information or knowledge related to internet governance and technology-related books and activities like that. So I come from a country that has gone through a conflict of 30 years, and I wanted to just probably
a comment or a question, whatever, proposed a post-conflict scenarios, because in our countries, most of the public libraries are either physically damaged or the operations are completely collapsed. So providing books or operational activities such as workshops and events like you're doing in other countries in the existing public libraries that is a lot more challenging than probably doing something mobile or something like that. So probably if you could include that in the least developing countries or post-conflict countries as a separate in itself would probably add more value to your program. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment to consider the mobile approaches using mobile for least developed countries in a post-conflict situation. Stuart, did you also have a comment?
Very quick, because I know we do want to discuss the principles. Yes, to the comment about library models, because I think some of the most interesting things in libraries are being done outside of Northern Europe. I think that Northern Europe is asleep. It's going to wake up in 30 years and discover that there is some really incredible countries that have gone past them in terms of what public can access in the community. And that's very interesting. Particularly former Eastern European countries have come on a very long way with their library systems. And there's many others I'd be happy to share. With the post-conflict, you should look at an organization called Bibliothèques Sans Frontières, who have some excellent programs to bring what they call their ideas box to post-conflict zones and begin to actually get information connected in the community as soon as possible after conflicts and natural disasters, all sorts of things like that. I'd be happy to introduce you to those guys.
Thank you, Stuart. So before we break into groups for our next activity, I'd like to get a bit of an understanding of who we have in the room. So I'm just going to name the stakeholder groups for the IGF, and if you can put up your hand if you feel you belong to that group, and you're welcome to put up your hand for more than one group if you have more than one role. So first, the technical and academic community. Okay, so we've got one person. And from government or intergovernmental organizations. Yeah, right. And private sector. Okay, no private sector today. We'll get them in the main session this afternoon, though. All right. Yeah, this is a tough time since it's that lunchtime, approaching lunchtime hour. And then civil society. Okay, so we're mostly civil society. I think that's pretty normal. So what we're going to do next is start looking at the concrete actions that we can take to move forward our principles that we developed over the past several months on the Dynamic Coalition list and the Google Doc that we started with. So what I'd like to do is split the room into, let's say, 3 groups. So the idea will be to try to come up in your group with one concrete action that each stakeholder group could take to further the principles for public access in libraries so that we can begin to brainstorm. This will be the starting place for our work for the next year on the Dynamic Coalition. So we're not trying to come up with the very best idea today, but to get the work started so that by the time we're here next year, we've solicited the opinions of our private sector, government, and technical and academic communities more, we'll have a robust list of specific things that people can take action on. I think that we've seen in the main sessions and the discussions of the intersessional work on Connecting the Next Billion that there is an interest in public access venues and that we are the right people to contribute ideas on where we need assistance for libraries specifically. So that's what we'd like to start working on today. So if you don't have a copy of the principles on public access in front of you, there should be one on a table nearby. So just pull that out. That's the one that looks like this. And then the specific principles are on page 2. So we have one around infrastructure, around policy, copyright, accessibility, privacy, skills development, open access content, and local content. So that's the span of the content that we want to work with today. But for now, what we're looking for is if you can try and come up with one concrete action for each stakeholder group that will help us take this further. So you can pick any area within your group. We have, let's say, 15 minutes to talk about this in the groups. We can go a little closer to 20. So we'll come back at 12, 17 into our big groups and share the ideas that we've come up with. So that'll give us time before we close. And then any of the outcomes, we'll put those up to the Dynamic Coalition list and on a Google Doc so that we can start getting our work done for the next couple of years. So I'm just going to stand up and figure out how many people we have split into groups. Yeah, it looks like first row, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, no, we'll take this section. This section. Yeah.
yeah,
comes
please,
up
yeah.
Is it working?
Sustainability
People are online now? Oh, so. Okay.
Okay, well, so yeah, so just to repeat what I was saying is that following on your point about governments having a role in digitizing local content, governments also often manage institutions that deal with heritage and museum type institutions, right? National heritage institution that would have materials that could possibly be digitized. So in addition to providing resources, they themselves could take the initiative there, collaborate with libraries and digitize local content.
do that, it's important to change your mind.
So we work in developing countries, and one of the biggest barrier is really that libraries, or especially public libraries, are not considered as the public access.
Well, we don't want any.
Providers, and to my because libraries are perceived as
to pick a book only one place,
relevant only for school children, and whenever you finish your school, it's not relevant. So I think the first step would be really include public libraries and community libraries where they exist international programs and strategies to develop rural and remote, let's say, to provide public access in rural and remote places. And when this is happening, then libraries would have tools, given that they have knowledge to involve community in using
Actually, I'd like to plug in the conversation because this worry might sound a bit trivial, but
So you mean that by involving them in the initiative, they'll gain the skills that they need to do more?
Appreciates libraries. I still think libraries
So,
are
sorry, we're
quite
talking about
autonomous in
each.
sort of like what's
Yeah, no, I'm talking. Sorry, are we going to? So we're just looking for one thing each, or were we all going to comment on each?
I mean, there are huge amounts of extremely interesting projects
Yeah,
going on,
yeah.
but people just don't know about them. I mean, of course, this is
so that the
local
line
marketing
is getting some kind of
but
activity.
I think that's a
So
huge
what we
bottleneck.
want to accomplish today is
For
come up
example,
with
in Finland,
one
we started
action
doing
each
this for
stakeholder
library projects.
group can take. It doesn't matter
At the same
of
time, it's about keeping sales. At the same time,
that
it's about
action
increasing
is.
privacy.
So it sounds like we'll have more. We may have more than
It's
one
the big
idea
thing
that's addressing
if you
local
ask
content.
people who work
But
in IT
But
and
the
so on, but
objective is we have a number
one
of
really knows about
ideas
it,
of how
although it's
libraries
also
can be promoted for public access.
so and it doesn't
one
even
of the
take
things
that
that
much
needs to happen is
resource. I
actually
mean,
laying
basically just set up one more computer and that's
so
it.
that means that there are probably specific actions that government and the technology community could take around laying infrastructure. So it could be anything. Your idea can be anything. It doesn't need to be focused on local content. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Right. Yes. Yes.
We have a huge amount of goodwill. I mean, everywhere I go, fantastic. Great, now can we translate that into like a piece of work? Because I mean, we come up against the technological fetish of modern society as well. That we all carry around a supercomputer in our pocket. There's an assumption on behalf of policymakers that you can get all the information you need to do by going to Google or whatever. So that's very difficult to combat when these things are so highly prized or done exactly the same. I want the latest.
And again, there's a marketing problem because there are a lot of
So there's an element there.
I think
of
here
highlighting
we are,
the uniqueness of our
there's more talk about libraries, and then it's much more, it's smaller the word, not so big like you were saying, and perhaps the proposal here, I think the importance here is to see if the libraries can do this kind of preservation without problem in law. This is the stuff, because for example now, if we buy book in e-books, we just buy the access and then there is no preservation on that. This is the problem. And I don't know if only the fair use can help us to do that. This is first best. Yes, and then for us this is a problem. And the second one is the preservation. This is also something that we need to understand. Someone in the world must do the preservation. And for us, I think the library is the only one that is not commercial one. There is no purpose for commercial, and then perhaps they can talk about this. I don't know. I just tell you something. I don't know if you know about one enterprise from Norway. They just developed one kind of stuff for the preservation. They are using, I was 2 weeks ago in the Expo, was beautiful. They are using microfilm, the same microfilm,
We'll document it.
digital
Great. So I think we've got a bunch of ideas from government at the moment. So what can we think of for, do you think one of yours belongs somewhere else?
No, this is something that is very, I don't know if you know about the
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there are elements here that would be relevant
like
to others. So what can
it's
we
the
think
name
of
of the
for
company,
the academic
Norway,
and
and it's
so
very
what could
interesting
they
to do there. But it doesn't matter. To do this one is so expensive because you need to buy the service. Again, it's another problem.
The academics have, especially the research institutions, have a lot of content. And here is a content not made they keep it for the institution or for the own network.
The cell phone,
And that information is very important. Really should be disseminated through all
to make available valuable resources, not all the resources, valuable resources. I find also the role of the library to make
I cannot agree more.
some distinction
And
in the
another
reputation of the material
role, just not only putting produce, let's say, academic research on open access, but also it would be good if academic communities would help repackage this information that it can be useful for local communities that are sometimes illiterate to read research papers, but the information that is provided there might be helping them to improve their livelihood. For example, agriculture. You know, the farmer in Uganda will never read a research paper, but he or she will need information on what to do with the soil or some pest or
not
something.
necessarily for free. For free what should be for free, not for free what should be for free.
So, you know, those small projects that, that we have case studies. We had, for example, Makerere University in Uganda working with public library to but also academics can simplify ideas, the repackage and local input in local languages sometimes.
But the idea is to suggest that they include a principle to preservation or if they, for example, include just in access content or copyright. Yeah, because you can write in another way that you can include just content.
It's a great effort to measure public access, and then we could add maybe from that you can add like gaps, region.
All right, can you not hear me? Oh, are they? Oh, hello, online community. Oh, sorry, of course, we're connected, right. I was a student of Sugata Mitra, who has done loads of really amazing work on ICT and development. So I was a student at Newcastle upon Tyne University, and that's where I did my education and development masters. And it seems to me that, from my experience of being a student there, that research communities definitely broaden their understanding of development. Sorry, their understanding of education. I think they kind of get development, and development's changing all the time. And I think that they might be very stuck in the idea of what education is. So I just, thinking about statutory education, just thinking about meeting the old Millennium Development Goals about everybody's rights to education as a child and a young person, rather than thinking about ongoing lifelong learning and formal learning, other places where education happens. So trying to encourage students, particularly postgrad students, to do their research on these topics, I think would be really, really useful. I also just wanted to say something about cultural heritage as well. Because of the destruction of cultural heritage sites in the Middle East, there's a real need now to make sure that information isn't lost, and universities can play a huge role in this with libraries to make sure that the information is not only gathered and collected and documented, but that it's classified, it's archived, it's held, and then it's accessible to communities and to governments. Who knows what. I was learning yesterday about an amazing project in Syria, where a Syrian activist took lots of photos of the Palmyra sites, which means that they might be able to be rebuilt at some stage in the future. So that's just an example. But he did that as an activist. What he now needs is relationships with librarians, archivists, and also academics.
Sometimes not possible. You have to wait until you get out of the country and then buy them. You can't afford it. They're not available.
For example,
so any
okay.
No, just quick thoughts about
just a quick point.
in countries like Colombia, it's been more and more common that the people start using smartphones, and there is a kind of idea that smartphones will reduce the use of public access, including libraries. And we find in our work there is a big issue because the policies from the government are more oriented to access, but not on appropriation of technology. So we discussed this in the regional group in ELAC, and things that raise up, included not to undermine the importance of public access, including libraries, because
I
most
can
of
also just add that it's not only library association, but also
numbers
library partners that
they are
really,
giving
really
us
important.
for access to internet and so on
This
are
area,
not
but
real
also
at all.
to come
The government says
developing
that 60% of the population in Colombia has access to internet, and that's not true. If you look carefully, only 9% of the population has real access to internet. So public access becomes still very relevant to countries like ours, and it's important also, we stress that to also not only promote from the government basic literacy, ICT literacy, but more advanced and more like a different level of use of technologies through the public access and libraries. based on appropriation strategies
because again,
that will
my problem,
bring people
like,
to
since I'm
different
saying
levels,
is
not only to access. Yeah.
So if you look at, take a look at the sections we've got.
So,
I mean, whilst we
if there are any experiences that how you
every single
yes.
one of the topics that we've just had in the last 5 minutes do cut across.
I have one thing, which is concerning open access, that there are huge discrepancies even between libraries.
Yes.
I personally know at least 10 people who are simply not leaving university because they would lose access. I refuse to take my papers and graduate because I would lose access to all the research data and articles. This is actually happening. So
is initiated by.
So basically, some libraries are more valuable
like,
than others.
for us, public libraries,
And I think that's problematic.
Public libraries belong.
It's time to come back to report back on an action that you would suggest. And remember, this is the beginning of our work in this area. So can you designate one person who can come to, or do we have mics in each of the groups now? We have one here.
And this is the role of the government to simply define the regulations related to property rights. Only when it is clear
Okay, so I know you each have a microphone, a wireless microphone, so I think that we can have you report back from your groups. So starting with the group at the back, I'm going to ask that you report a couple of ideas that you have. It can be one from each of the stakeholder groups, or if what you ended up doing was focusing in one area, report a couple of those. And just as a reminder, of course, this is the beginning of our work on actions. So we'll keep working this over the course of 2016, and we'll put it in the ideas that are generated today into a Google Doc so we can collaborate. So don't worry if you don't have time to get all your ideas out, or if you have lots more to talk about. That's the idea, was to get the discussion started. So starting with the group at the back.
So I'll just, we've actually in 15 minutes begun a fairly big philosophical discussion, I think, on the role of libraries. So yeah, we've covered across the areas of the principles, and some of our things will need a little bit more work on to become concrete. But I think the suggestion from our colleague from Afghanistan about how the library community needs to learn to connect the expertise from the different stakeholder groups in support of its work is something which can really be done in this forum. So that's a very concrete sort of thing. We talked a lot about the need to support libraries in a very fundamental way through money and through support for sustainable support for facilities. And we talked a lot about messaging, which is clear that the library community can improve on. And I think that we are doing that in this context, but also you've seen the work that we've done at the UN level. It needs to happen now at national levels and at different sorts of levels. And the last thing I would say that's concrete, although as I say we did discuss a lot of things, is perhaps there are more conversations out there that we can crash to talk about libraries. Just talking about libraries doesn't work. You need to talk about what libraries can do for open data. You need to talk about it in that way. So that's I hope that's a kind of quick précis of what we discussed, although we did get onto intellectual property, and we need to get out of here before that.
Yeah, we did that yesterday. So, okay, so coming to the group at the front, can you present some of the ideas that you came up with? This group at the front.
It's Vince Cerf. We spent an enormous amount of time talking about preservation of digital content and how hard this is. There are technical problems. There are legal frameworks that permit people to have access to content that, and use of content that might not otherwise be permitted under normal copyright laws. And finally, there's a question of long-term sustainability. So the action item here is not that we pursue this question and engage with the various stakeholders who can address these three different areas. So that's one item. The second one is very simple: connect all the libraries. We think we should just connect them. And I don't know if that sounds trivial, but it is not. But the more important thing is that if we do that, then the assets of the libraries and the capabilities of the libraries will become available to all of us, all of them. And they become a grand collaboration. That would be really exciting. And we did talk about a few other things, but let me stop there, if that's okay with the group.
Great, thank you. And now for our group in the middle.
Yeah, actually we need probably more time to talk about actions, but some things we discussed are quite similar. We talked about digitization of local content, but also creation of local content and making it available and accessible to communities that might be illiterate, for example, or have no education to read research papers on farming and so on. We talked also about the responsibility of civil society in a way that they can use windows of opportunities that they are aware of in their countries to bring libraries into dialogue and get public access and connection. Sometimes local institutions are left from those out of this dialogue, so civil society, which are more active, could be a way to really connect. And what else? We also talked about how private sector and also how public access fund can be used for connecting libraries to internet and also getting all other services that are important to communities. But we did not finish. We just started.
Great. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do is whoever was taking notes for the group to provide those to me. I'll also share on, so we'll put some summaries into the Google Doc, and there's someone from the library community who's involved in our coordination in each group. So if you can share the notes that you have with that person, Sueli for this group at the front, Ramune in the middle, and Stuart at the back, so that we can make sure we get everything that you talked about today captured, put that out on the list, and then you can take a look at it and improve and add, and we'll start working towards our outcomes to present at the 2016 IGF. So thank you everyone for being here today. I hope I'll see you at the main session at 4:30 on dynamic coalitions, where we'll get feedback on the principal statement itself from the broader stakeholder group. Thanks everyone.